Welcome back. I'm Jesse Baines with Yahoo Finance Canada. You're watching Editor's Edition, and today we are talking real estate, arguably Canada's favorite pastime these days. We're hearing some whispers of a bit of a potential slowdown. Here to set the record straight, answer your questions, and much more, we have John Pasalis of Philosophy Realty. He joins us in Toronto. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks for having me.
And in Vancouver, we have Steve Soretsky. He's with Oakwyn Realty. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Always fun to be on. Let's do it.
And this is our 25th episode, believe it or not, our 25th anniversary. This started off as just one live event, and it's gone on and on and on. There's just so much to talk about. You guys have a lot of questions. So we will get to those, as I said, this time for sure. But let's start with a look on the ground. What's happening in the GTA? Are these whispers, these rumors true, John? Are we seeing something of a slowdown in the GTA?
Yeah, we are, but I'm going to qualify. I mean, we have to take that with a grain of salt. I mean, when I talk about a slowdown, some buyers hear that and they end up competing, with 15 or 20 other buyers on homes, and they think, what's this guy talking about? There's no slowdown. It's still a seller's market. But there is definitely a slight slowdown. I mean, when the market goes from as insane as it has been recently, and starts to slow down, what that looks like is, we start to see more homes that have offer nights who fail to sell on their offer night, either because they didn't get offers or they didn't get the price they wanted. So what ends up happening is the agents take them off the market and then relist them at a higher price usually. And we start to see fewer showings. So these are the early signs. So definitely we're seeing a slight cool down. Again, the nicest homes are still getting 10 to 15 offers. But definitely we're starting to see more homes getting fewer showings and fewer offers on their offer night. And that part of this is due to a lot of new listings hit the market in February or last month. We're down compared to last year, but we're very strong sort of historically compared to, say, pre-COVID levels. So the listings have definitely helped kind of take some heat out of the market.
Does that depend on the type of home? Are we seeing a difference in the type of dwelling? Whereas, maybe possibly people who couldn't afford that single-family home, the detached, the town, the semi, whatever. Are we seeing anything spilling over into the condo market? Do you see a difference in terms of the number of bids, the activity, the heat, the cooling, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I mean, the condo market, I'd say, still a little bit busier, probably not as big of an impact on this like moderate slowdown we're seeing. I'd say that's probably more in the low-rise market where home prices are a little bit more expensive because the buyers are getting priced out or just moving to the condominium market. So the condominium market's still pretty busy.
And the $1 million question, there aren't a lot of $1 million detached homes available to this, but the $1 million question, what does this mean for prices now and going forward?
I think we're more likely to see prices stabilize right now. Like I think we're going to, last year was interesting because last year prices exploded, from December, January, and February of 2021. And then they pretty much stayed flat until August. Even though it was a tight market, prices did not increase very much. And I think, again, I think that's probably the most likely path in the near term, that we'll start to see some moderation in price growth. I think we're going to start to see buyers be a little bit more patient and less anxious. And again, this is what happens when they start to see more inventory and they feel like they have more options. They don't feel like this urgency that they have to pay $50,000 more than the home that sold last week. Their mindset starts shifting and they think, well, you know what, if I don't get this one, there'll be another 10 tomorrow that hit the market. And I think that's probably what we're likely going to see as we move into the spring.
Okay, sounds like FOMO is starting to wear off, maybe just a titch. Steve, what are we seeing in Vancouver?
I think it's pretty similar. I mean, these two markets, as we talked about before, tend to follow each other. And what we're seeing right now is basically the early signs of things slowing down. It's kind of similar to like what John said, which is, I've got clients that I'm like, hey, listen, I'm starting to see things are starting to slow down. And then sure enough, they get into the one house where there's 13 offers and it goes $200,000 above ask. And they go, what the hell are you talking about? But in reality, what you are seeing is you're seeing quite a few more homes now that, on offer day, they aren't getting any offers. And or they're only getting one offer. In some cases, yeah, they might still be getting two offers and going $200,000 over the asking price, because those buyers, I think, haven't quite figured out or haven't quite tuned into the market is starting to change directions, and they're so used to and so ingrained in their mindset that they have to pay $200,000 over ask to be able to get a house. So they're still kind of paying that. But like I said, we're starting to see the early signs. I mean, yes, the market's still hot. We're coming off of arguably, craziest bull market we've seen, probably more so than 2015-16 here. So, but we are seeing the early signs that things are changing. Fewer offers, some homes not getting any offers that were, would have, had they listed 2 weeks ago, maybe would have got 7 or 8 offers. So, yeah, early signs, things are changing.
Do you think, Steve, that there's a shift in mentality? Like you said, buyers are just kind of assuming that you got to pay around $200,000 or more to be competitive. Do you think? And I think back to a time when we used to talk about, oh, let's come in with a strong offer. Let's come in at their asking price, or slightly under, maybe, depending on the situation. But nowadays, it's like, okay, well, they're asking $1 million, so we know we have to bid like 1.2 or 1.3. It goes on and on in some cases. But do you see that changing anytime, maybe even this year or the next?
Yeah, I think for sure, like later through this year. I mean, we're just entering now the spring market, right? So March, April, May, it's historically the busiest time of the year for a number of new listings coming to market. So I think those buyers that have been struggling to buy something, they're going to get an opportunity here in the spring as the new listings come to market. And something that John talked about, which was, okay, well, prices might stabilize. I think what's important to understand here is that when you get a situation with 7 or 8 offers, you see a house that might be priced at, say, 1.6. Because you get 7 or 8 offers, it might sell for 1.8. But I think what happens is, like, when you only get 2 offers, you might only go for 1.7. And so, yeah, I mean, is the market really falling? I don't know, not really. But I think what's happening is they don't have to FOMO into paying obscene prices where you can't even look at a neighboring sale and say, hey, yeah, that house just sold for this, so let's pay that. Like, people particularly over the last 2 months, have basically been making up prices. They're not even really looking at comparable sales. They're just saying, this is, what do I want to pay and how much do I need to pay to secure this house? And so I think as we enter a period here where you're going to have more supply coming to market, the demand is starting to wane a little bit. I think that people are going to be a little bit more rational in their numbers. And so I think we'll see that stabilization that John's talking about.
Right. So what is the lingering? Go ahead, John, please. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so Steve's 100% right. Like when I said prices may not fall, he's right that, if we get to a point where there's only 1 or 2 offers on homes in April or May, 100%, it might sell for less than what the neighboring home sold for in February, right? For the exact same reasons that Steve's talking about, because in February, the neighbor's house got 25 offers, while in May, the home that is being listed now is only getting 2. So it's potentially going to sell for a little bit less than it would have sold for. And in theory, that's a little bit of a cooling in prices that can certainly happen. And I think part of the reason why that happens is because in May, if the market is softer, that seller usually in most cases already bought and they need to sell their home one way or another, right? They don't have the luxury of kind of waiting it out for this high price. So we might see a little bit of cooling and a little bit more value if we end up seeing that much more inventory and a lot of kind of demand kind of pulling out of the market because of that.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please do.
Well, yeah. So
I'll come back later. Go ahead.
John, I just had this exact example play out this week. I had a listing that we ended up entertaining. We took a bully offer on it. I think the buyers paid a very pretty sum, and so I encouraged the seller to take it. I get a call from that realtor, this week saying, "Hey, we listed, they bought your home, and so we listed their existing home for sale, and we only got 1 offer on offer date, and it's." It's less than what we were expecting and hoping for, but we're unfortunately in a position where we're going to have to accept it. And so, I think calls like that, it's anecdotes like that we're starting to see. And so, moving forward, it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up.
I wanted to ask the sort of the marginal buyer that comes in and bids way above everybody else. How long does that effect last when it comes to comparables? Does that fade after a period of time where the people looking at the comps say to themselves can say, well, that was then, this is now, or does that linger for a period, John? How does that work?
It lingers for a period if it's very competitive, like kind of back to what Steve said earlier. If there's still 5 or 6 or 7 offers on homes, then yeah, you're going to be competitive. But if there's only 1 or 2 on the offer night, that's when buyers, quite frankly, like the behavior shifts. They go from like FOMO and anxious to thinking, I want to get a bit of a deal here. And you know what? And if I don't get it for like 50 grand less than what the neighbors sold for, I don't care. There's going to be another one tomorrow. And that can happen quite quickly. Like that actually happened last year, summer of 2021. Even though it was a tight market, there were just more houses for sale, and it was just, less anxious, and buyers were patient. And, we had clients making offers on homes with conditions on financing and inspection for under asking, which is, unheard of today, right? So it can linger. I think it's going to just depend on how many homes get listed, how busy it is on the buying side. But if you start to see 0, 1, or 2 offers, usually those buyers start to get a little bit greedy.
Interesting. Okay. It sounds like almost some signs of a healthy Canadian real estate market in our big cities. Steve, before we move on to questions, because we will get to questions, condos versus low rise, are we seeing any sort of big difference in terms of demand?
I mean, I think that we're starting to see, well, it's been playing out for a while now, which I've been talking about, which is the sort of pivot, or the flippening, I'll call it, which is the condo market's almost, I would argue, going to be outperforming the detached segment this year. I think that it's kind of playing catch up, right? I think that people have been basically getting priced out, exhausted with how much house prices have gone up in that, suburban detached, and we're actually seeing strengthening in the inner city condo market. So perhaps that's also an end of COVID play as well. But yeah, I mean, there's pockets of the market. Again, real estate it's hyper local. We don't necessarily have a national market, and it's hard to necessarily paint the greater Vancouver area with one broad stroke. But in general, what we're seeing is that pandemic trade seems to be sort of tapering off.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see as things reopen more. Just from past discussions, it has felt like when things get back to normal, the weather gets nicer, Canadian preoccupation with real estate sort of takes a back seat. It'll be interesting to see in the months ahead. But let's get to questions. Let's start with Darren Barber. We can throw this one to John because it's in his neck of the woods. I have a semi-detached home in Leslieville. You live in Leslieville, right, John?
I do, yeah.
We won't give away.
We
won't give away your exact address, but okay. I have a semi-detached home in Leslieville on a laneway, which I bought in May 2021. There's a 2-car parking space behind the house, no garage. It is zoned for laneway housing. What are your thoughts about adding a laneway house? Would buying a laneway house add significant value to my home? Do you have any resources where I can get more detailed information? Great question, Darren.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. I've been getting that question a lot more. And obviously, without getting into the specifics, because it's obviously you need to know a lot and the cost. I'll say generally, adding a laneway house is not going to add that much more value over and above the costs of actually building it, right? So, for example, if you think about, I bought a semi for 1.5 million. If that laneway house cost me $500,000 to build, well, yeah, maybe you can sell your home with the laneway house for 2 million, but you're not going to sell it for 2.4. Like, you're not going to get this big financial benefit, right? And that's just partly because laneway houses are pretty expensive to build. The other factor is when you're selling it, you're targeting a different buyer, right? Like, so for the average homeowner who wants a family in a big backyard, they may not want a laneway home in their backyard, because the laneway home is potentially going to take up some parking spots, or it's going to maybe take up part of their backyard. Whereas some buyers will want that, multi-generational living if they want family to live in it. So you're going to be targeting a different buyer. It's going to add value, but I wouldn't call it like this incredible investment where you're going to get this massive return on it. You're probably just going to get most of what you invest into it, which is the case for most renovations in homes. You know what I mean? Most rentals in homes, you don't profit off of the rental. You generally, hopefully, get close to what you invested into it. And I would think laneway homes are probably very similar.
Okay, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if you read the study. I don't want to put you on the spot too much here, but I believe some professors at UBC, Tom Davidoff was at least one of them, who found that laneway homes, areas with laneway homes tend to have lower property values. Is that something that you're familiar with, or you think that should be a concern when it comes to laneway houses?
I read the headline of the study. I think this is part of the problem, I think, where academia tries to transfer over to sort of boots on the ground. I haven't found that personally. I think that laneway adds value. We tend to find it adds about $250K worth of value, which is what it basically costs to build the laneway house. So that seems to kind of even out, basically. That's been my personal experience.
Okay. Next we have Shane. Shane asks, I'm a homeowner. I know this is a question that I think we get a lot, but it's a good one as well. I'm a homeowner and am wondering when is the best time to take out equity from my home. My mortgage broker is being a bit reluctant to go ahead with the amount I want. What do you think? Please advise. Steve, what do you think, without knowing Shane's exact specific financial situation, but what advice would you have for Shane?
Yeah, it's certainly not financial advice. I think it always depends on the individual's financial position. But certainly the best time, in theory, to take out equity is when the market's at the top, right? You can drain as much as you want on an inflated value. So that would be the best time to take out the equity. Now, keep in mind that you better be, depending, what are you doing with that equity? If you're going to utilize it to buy up more assets and invest, smartly and strategically, then yeah, it makes sense. Just you have to be in a situation as well where you can, if you're taking on, for example, a higher mortgage payment, can you weather that? Can you absorb that higher payment? Then yeah, go for it. But yeah, in theory, the best time to take out equity is when your house is up at these inflated prices today.
Do you, Steve, think that taking out equity now is a call on house prices continuing to rise if you are using it to buy additional additional property versus just cashing out and doing whatever with the money?
Well, I think that's the thing. It depends on what you're doing with the money. So, in my opinion, how I'd be looking at it today, I think the GTA is somewhat similar to Vancouver. The premise would be, listen, I'm going to take out the equity of my house today because the valuations, I think, are really high. I think that this market is we've just discussed earlier, arguably potentially peaking out here. Take the equity now while you can access it. Because I don't think, again, maybe the market moves sideways here for the next 3-4 years. And so, yeah, take the equity now. And if you want to invest that strategically into, say, an investment property, you just want to have the cash that you can deploy in an opportunity in 6 to 8 months from now, at least you have it there ready. So that's kind of how I would be looking at it. But again, everyone has to judge their own financial position, because, if you're leveraging up if you're taking on a whole bunch of leverage today and planning to go buy a boat and you're not really certain about your employment situation, it's probably a bad idea.
Okay. Think twice before buying that boat, if that's what you're planning to do with that money. John, I'm going to really put you on the spot here. If Shane here does take out equity, has cash, does he wait 6 months if he wants to use it to buy another investment property? It is the Canadian way for many. Does he deploy those funds today or wait 6 months?
Yeah, probably not today. I'd say the market's still pretty hot. As an investor, that's just at least the way I would invest. I would not want to be buying real estate as an investment, competing with 15 people. Like, it's just not what I would want to do. You know, I'd want a calmer market where, yeah, maybe half of the homes are getting bidding wars, but I'm focusing on the 50% that aren't, right? And that are sitting on the market and maybe aren't in good condition and potentially have a little bit more value. So, you know, I wouldn't rush. I think, you know, you refinance, you have your cash ready, and you start looking. I mean, that's the thing with the market. It's not like you can time it, but you want to start keeping an eye on the market. And once you see things cool down a little bit and there's more opportunity and value, then that's kind of where you jump in, I'd say, as an investor.
All right, and now let's move on to Harold. Harold is a regular viewer of ours, watches along all the time, and has some ideas for ways to get things back to earth, let's say. So here are some of his ideas. For short-term flips under 2 years, fully taxed without 50% capital. So for those, in that case, fully taxed without 50% capital gain reduction. So that could take some flippers out of the market. So between 2 and 5 or maybe 7 years, decreasing that taxation up to the full 50% capital gain reduction. So hold on to a little longer, less speculation, less flipping. Maybe, I should clarify, people are speculating and holding for long periods. But anyhow, and then maybe for 10 plus years, main residency with no tax upon sale. Steve, what do you think about these ideas?
I mean, in full disclosure, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm in the business of rehabbing properties. So, I mean, I just think that the solution from everybody in Canada seems to be, oh, let's just keep taxing, more tax, more tax. And it's like we have so much tax and so much regulation. Like, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the cost of money, in my honest opinion. The cost of money, when you can borrow at 1.5%, you're going to continue to get capital into the housing market. I just would like to point out a situation. You're talking about primary residence, like, you know, you got to live in it for 10 years. Like, what about all the people that have, I have tons of clients where they're a young couple, they want to get into the housing market, they obviously can't afford a detached house. So the stepping stone is, let's go buy a 2-bedroom condo. And then they have 2 kids. And then what? You know, they want to move, you know, once they have so usually it's like they buy a 2-bedroom condo and then 3 to 4 years later they upsize to the townhouse or to the single family house. Well, if all of a sudden you get taxed on that because you're not sitting in your house for 10 years, like because you decided to have children, like I just don't think people are really factoring this in. I mean, I can give you one other scenario where I had a client. He was the furthest thing from a speculator, young family. He just looked at it and says, oh my gosh, my house just went up $500,000 tax-free in 18 months. I'm going to go sell and rent. And so if he is only doing that because he's saying, this is $500,000 tax-free, he's just added supply to the market. He decided to put his house on the market, let someone else buy it, and went to go rent. So is he a bad person? I mean, I would argue that had you had that tax rule in place, he probably wouldn't have sold, and thus there would be fewer listings on the market to buy. So I think there's no perfect solution here. I just don't think taxing is the solution.
Interesting. I want to ask about one particular tax that seems quite large, and I wonder what I'm talking about the land transfer tax. How much does it cost to transfer land? Why is it so high? What happens with all that money, Steve?
I mean, it hasn't changed in BC. It hasn't changed in BC for, I don't know, 30 years or something like that. I have to go back and look at it. But I know that the BC government, for example, I think pulled in $3.2 billion worth of property transfer tax revenue last year, which was an all-time record high. It actually had basically doubled from 2019. So, I mean, the BC government is raking in a windfall in terms of tax revenues from the property market. And it's interesting to see that, you know, again, valuations have effectively doubled over the last 10 years, and they have not adjusted the rate of property transfer tax in BC. So.
Okay, John, what's your take on Harold here's ideas?
I mean, I tend to agree with Steve. I mean, I don't think these are solutions or what we're facing. I mean, the reality is, I mean, I think taxing flippers is a popular idea, but I don't, number one, in the GTA, they're not a big part of the market. They're maybe 5%. And of those 5%, a lot of them are actually investing in housing and renovating homes or building homes or making, adding additions. And that's actually positive. They're buying homes that usually regular home buyers are not interested because they look terrible. And they're investing capital and making them livable. So I think you don't want to discourage that with a tax. So again, I'm not sure these are the right approaches for kind of addressing some of the dynamics that we're seeing right now.
Can I just chime in there really quickly?
Please do. Please do.
So yeah, just to give you another example, like we see properties all the time that maybe go to foreclosure or something similar where basically they're almost like hoarder homes. Like there's literally like garbage up to your knees when you get in the home, like totally gross. The typical person isn't going to take that project on. Like that becomes basically an uninhabitable home, and you need cash to do $100,000 renovation. The banks don't finance your renovation. There's one program through CMHC will finance up to $40,000 of a renovation. But so for example, you actually need outside capital to come in, fix up like a hoarder home and put it back on the market. And they're actually like rehabilitating supply that otherwise would not be livable. So those are some of the cases. I think it's just important to understand that like the typical person on the street has no experience renovating. They don't have the time or want to take on the headache of renovating. So you actually need some of these people to actually improve housing supply. So that's the other side of the story. I get it that there's a negative connotation around flipping. I understand that, but I think it's important to understand that a lot of these cases, they actually are needed as well.
Right, and I mean the Property Brothers, yeah, they make it look so easy, flip or flop. It looks like a lot of fun, but I can understand that it's not. Everything is not as it seems. I believe, Steve, that program you mentioned. Correct me if I'm wrong. The cutoff is like $1 million, though, so not probably applicable to a lot of properties these days.
Correct. It'd be CMHC's. The purchase price would have to be under $1 million, and then they'll typically do a construction loan. They'll do a loan improvement, which is basically CMHC. My understanding is they'll lend up to $40,000 to do your renovation. But I think, as everybody was well aware, $40,000 gets you, new flooring and paint. That's about it in today's, inflationary environment.
Yes, and the Property Brother can confirm from watching the Property Brothers that $40,000, love it or list it, won't get you anywhere. Okay, let's get to Andy. Andy says, I bought a new house nearly 2 years ago, but there's been delay after delay with no completion date in sight. Should the builders be required to compensate me for all my added costs and inconvenience? Andy is surely not alone in today's pandemic world. Should Andy be compensated in any way, John?
Andy, if Andy's talking about he bought a pre-construction home and is being delayed and hasn't been completed, Andy should be grateful that the builder has not canceled his agreement of purchase and sale and said, take your deposit back, we're reselling it at today's prices. So no, I don't think Andy should be worried about compensation because he's going to get compensated the day he gets his keys. And hopefully his builder goes through and actually completes the deal and doesn't do what a lot of builders are doing, which is saying, sorry, prices are up, I have to cancel this transaction. So I would be more worried about the builder backing out of the deal versus compensation for the delays.
Absolutely. And that has happened, as we know. We've talked about it on this show. Ontario Premier Doug Ford weighed in on the issue. People have had their deals canceled or even told pay up large sums of money to bring it up to market value or say goodbye to the home. Any advice for Andy, Steve, to close out the show? Should Andy just be happy and count his money, count his gains? I guess, well, I mean, he's going to live in it. He's not going to gain, but I mean, if he's an investor, we don't know his particular situation. But he said he had costs. Unclear, I guess. Steve, what's your advice for Andy?
I think I'm going to be the most hated man in Canada after this show, supporting property flippers and whatnot. But I think that Andy, you always got to read the fine print. We've talked about this before on the show in pre-sales. Read the fine print. I think that nobody could have foreseen the rapid rise in the 30-year high in inflation. That doesn't really account for the bulk of that inflation. Inflation in the construction side of things is massive. So as John alluded to, I think just be thankful that the developer hasn't tried to cancel the project and not push through, because the bottlenecks in the supply chain And I think everybody's well aware, you put up a chart of lumber prices. I mean, astronomical growth there. So I think that we have to be cognizant that, unfortunately, a lot of this is unforeseeable. I know some developers have tried to push through, force majeure sort of thing. And so it's something that everybody's kind of living through right now.
All right. We are thankful for John and Steve. Thank you so much, John, for being here. John Pasalis of Philosophy Realty.
Thanks for having me.
And Steve Saretsky of Open Realty. Thank you for being here, Steve. Let's hope you are not Canada's most hated man after this.
Thank you. I love you all, by the way. So God bless.
Okay, while we wait for the fallout from that, be sure to check out Yahoo Finance Canada for all your news on real estate, retail, everything to do, all the economic impacts of oil prices, you name it. Yahoo Finance Canada, that's your place to be. Next time, we will discuss more about Canadian real estate. Until then, see you.